I was always a practical person, grounded in the here and now. But that was before everything changed, before the dreams began. It all started a few months after the accident. I don't like to talk about it much, but the memory is burned into my mind. Emily, my best friend, the one person who kept me sane through the toughest of times, was dead. I couldn't save her. I should have, but I didn't. The guilt swallowed me whole, and for weeks I existed in a fog, struggling to find meaning in anything. Then the dreams began. At first, they were faint. In each one, I found myself standing at the edge of a dense forest. The trees were tall and twisted, their gnarled limbs stretching out like skeletal hands. The air was thick, oppressive, and though I couldn't see what lay within, I felt it, a presence, watching, waiting, and then the whispers. It wasn't clear at first, just faint voices, like the wind carrying a secret. But slowly, the words started to take shape. "Come closer," they whispered. "Come closer, and you will know the truth." At first, I thought they were just the echoes of my guilt, my subconscious trying to punish me. But the longer the dreams went on, the more real they felt. It was as if I was being pulled into that forest, a place I had never seen before, and yet I felt oddly connected to it. I woke up gasping for breath, the sound of the whispers still ringing in my ears. Sweat coated my skin, and my heart raced. It was the same every time. That forest, those voices, and that feeling that something was waiting for me, something I had to face. The dreams grew more vivid, more intense, each one dragging me deeper into the forest. And then one night, it happened. I found myself standing in the forest, not in my bed, not in my apartment, but here, in the thick, suffocating darkness. The trees towered over me, their blackened trunks twisted like ancient bones. The air smelled damp, heavy with decay, and the whispering was louder now. It surrounded me, pressing in on every side. "Do you hear it?" the voices said, almost a hiss. "Do you hear your past?" I took a step forward, my feet sinking into the soft, wet ground. The forest seemed alive, its very presence pressing against me. The trees, no, the wood itself, seemed to shift, their branches groaning as if they were waking from some ancient slumber. I looked around, but there was nothing to see, nothing to explain why I felt like I was being pulled deeper. The whispers grew louder. "She is here," they said, as if in unison. The fear that had been a dull ache in the back of my mind now flared to life, burning hot and raw. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew this place was wrong. This place wasn't just a dream. It was real. Somehow, it was real. Suddenly, I heard a rustling behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing. Nothing but shadows and the faint outlines of trees, their twisted branches reaching out like claws. But then I saw it, just for a moment. Oh, flicker in the darkness. A silhouette. Someone. Or something. I wanted to run, but my body wouldn't move. My legs were rooted to the ground, my heart thudding in my chest as the whispers grew louder, more frantic. The figure moved again, and this time I saw it clearly. Her, Emily. Her face was twisted, contorted with an expression of pain and terror. Her eyes were wide, empty, staring at me with an accusation I could feel deep in my bones. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Only the whispers, growing louder and louder, until they drowned everything else. "Help me." Her lips formed, though no sound escaped. I reached out to her, but she vanished before I could touch her. The forest closed in around me, and the whispers turned into guttural growls, as if the trees themselves were alive, aware of me. And then I woke up, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me back, something real. Something from that forest, from the other side. I felt the weight of it in the pit of my stomach, like the air was thick with it. The darkness had seeped into my world, and I didn't know how to escape it. The days that followed were a blur. I tried to go about my life, to ignore the growing sense of dread that clung to me, but the whispers didn't stop. They followed me, always in the background, a constant murmur that I couldn't quite place. I couldn't sleep without hearing them. I couldn't focus on anything without them creeping into my thoughts, their voices clawing at the edges of my mind. The dreams came every night, each one more vivid than the last. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, a side effect of my grief and trauma. But the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. Then, one night, it happened again. I woke up in the forest. I could feel the dampness of the ground beneath. My feet, the cold air biting at my skin. I could smell the rotting leaves, the decay that hung heavy in the air. I didn't know how I had gotten here or why, but I knew this was no dream. I was here, and I wasn't alone. The trees creaked and groaned, their branches twisting and reaching like they had minds of their own. I felt the ground shift beneath me, the earth alive with an energy that pulsed through the air. The whispers were louder now, more frantic, echoing in my ears like a chorus of voices, all speaking at once. "Come closer," they beckoned. "The truth is waiting." I turned, my breath hitching in my throat. The forest was alive, it was alive. And I could feel it reaching into me, into the deepest corners of my mind. And then I saw them, figures lurking just beyond the trees. They were humanoid, but twisted, their limbs too long, their faces obscured by the darkness. Their eyes gleamed like shards of glass, and they moved without making a sound. I took a step back, my heart hammering in my chest, but I couldn't look away. Something inside me knew. This was no ordinary forest. This was a place between worlds, a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I was trapped in it. One of the figures stepped forward, its face finally visible. It was me, a twisted version of myself, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that stared at me with an intensity I couldn't understand. It smiled at me, a cruel, knowing grin. "You cannot escape," it whispered, its voice echoing in my mind. Before I could respond, the creature lunged, and everything went black. When I woke again, the forest had changed. It wasn't just the trees that were different. The very air felt heavier, as if the weight of the place was pressing in on me, suffocating me. The whispers had grown louder, more insistent, until it felt like my skull was being crushed under the sheer force of their voices. The figure of Emily was gone now, but I could still feel her presence. Her absence was like a shadow that hovered just out of reach, a void I couldn't fill. And then I saw it. The creature, the one that had appeared to me before. It was standing at the edge of the clearing, watching me with its hollow eyes, its twisted limbs writhing like snakes. It was waiting. I backed away, but the creature didn't move. It just stood there, its eyes following me, never blinking. The air seemed to grow colder, and the whispers grew louder still. "You can't escape," it said again, its voice a soft, sibilant hiss. "You brought yourself here, and now you must face the truth." I tried to speak, but my throat was dry. My tongue felt heavy, like it was being suffocated. The creature stepped closer, its form shifting, stretching like liquid, and I realized this was no ordinary being. This was a part of the forest, a part of me. "You carry guilt with you," it hissed. "You cannot hide from it, not here, not in this place." I didn't know what to say. The guilt I carried had been buried deep for so long, but here, in the forest, it was all I could think of. Emily's face, the accident, the blame, the whispers, swirled around me, growing louder, their words turning into a cacophony that drowned everything else. "She's waiting for you," they chanted. "You cannot run." And then, like a nightmare I could never escape, the forest closed in around me. and I was lost. I don't know how much time passed after the forest closed in around me. Time itself seemed to stretch and bend in ways I couldn't comprehend. I had the strange sensation of being both outside of time and completely trapped within it. The darkness swirled around me like a thick, suffocating fog, and the air tasted bitter, cold. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The whispers, the voices, were louder now, filling my head with 1,000 thoughts that weren't my own. They tangled together, each one more twisted than the last, each one reminding me of everything I had ever feared, everything I had ever regretted. I could hear Emily's voice again, though it wasn't the soft, comforting sound it used to be. It was harsh, twisted, full of accusation. "You failed me," she whispered. "You left me to die." It was a dagger in my heart, the words cutting deep, digging into my very soul. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't run. The ground beneath me shifted, and suddenly I was no longer standing. My body fell, though there was no ground, no floor, just emptiness. I was falling through the void, through the dark, through the infinite layers of this place. I didn't scream. I didn't even have the strength to scream. The weight of my guilt, my shame, it was all consuming. And then everything stopped. The air cleared. The whispers ceased. I opened my eyes and found myself standing in a clearing, the sky overhead so dark it seemed to press in on me. The trees were thinner here, their bark smooth and silver, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes. I felt an overwhelming sense of unease, like I had stepped into something ancient, something that had been waiting for me. And then I saw them. A group of figures moved from the shadows, emerging from behind the trees. They were tall, too tall, and their faces were obscured by hoods and veils of darkness. They moved with an unsettling grace, as if they were part of the forest itself. Their eyes gleamed, the only visible part of their faces shining with an eerie, predatory light. They were watching me. The figure at the front stepped forward, and though I couldn't see its face, I could feel its gaze. It was as if it was reading. Me reading my very thoughts. I could feel it probing into my mind, digging into the darkest recesses of my memories. "You've wandered far," the figure said, its voice a soft, melodic whisper that seemed to reverberate in my skull. "Farther than you should have. And now, you must face the truth." I took a step back, my body shaking uncontrollably, but I couldn't run, I couldn't move. It was like my feet were rooted to the earth. "You're part of the forest now," the figure continued, its voice low and smooth, as if it was savoring every word. "Everything you've ever feared, everything you've ever wanted to forget, it's here, in this place." I wanted to speak, to ask questions, but the words wouldn't come. The only thing I could feel was the overwhelming presence of these creatures watching me, judging me. "You will never leave," the figure said softly. "Not until you face it." I didn't understand. "Face what?" I croaked, my throat raw. "The truth of your guilt," the figure said, stepping closer. "The truth of what you've done. You are the forest's creation just as it is yours. The guilt you carry binds you here. It is the price you must pay." I was drowning in the weight of it, the crushing weight of their words. I had thought I had let it go, that I had forgiven myself for Emily's death, but now I realized I hadn't. I couldn't. The guilt was still there, festering inside me, taking root, growing into something darker, something that I could never escape. The whispers rose again, louder now, swirling around me like a storm, a cacophony of voices from all directions. "She's waiting," they hissed. "You left her. You abandoned her." I closed my eyes, clenching my fists, trying to block out the voices, but they wouldn't stop. They never stopped, and in the distance, I could hear Emily's voice again, faint but unmistakable. "Help me," she called, the words filled with sorrow. and rage. And I was forced to face the truth. I wasn't sure how long I stood there, trapped in that clearing with the figures, my mind unraveling with every whispered accusation. But time no longer made sense. The reality of this place, of the forest, was warping. I could feel it shifting, changing, stretching like rubber. One moment, I was standing in a field of silver trees. The next, I was back in that hollow, dark place where the whispers began. The forest was changing me, distorting my mind, twisting my memories. I tried to speak, to cry out, but the words choked in my throat. I wanted to scream, but all that came out was a strangled breath. The forest was smothering me, and then, through the darkness, I saw it. A figure, emerging from the shadows. It was tall, much taller than I remembered. At first I couldn't tell who it was, the darkness obscuring its features. But as it stepped closer, I realized it was me, my own reflection, a twisted, monstrous version of myself. Its face was gaunt, hollowed out, the skin stretched tight across its skull. Its eyes gleamed with malice, and its smile was a grotesque parody of my own. "You never thought you'd face yourself, did you?" it said, its voice a distorted echo of mine. "But you're here now. You're in the forest, and the forest is inside you." I tried to take a step back, but my feet wouldn't move. I was frozen in place, unable to escape this nightmarish version of myself. I could feel it. This creature, this thing. It wasn't just some monster from the forest. It was me. It was my fears, my regrets, my guilt, all brought to life in a twisted, grotesque form. "You wanted to forget," it whispered, leaning closer, its breath hot against my face. "But you can't. Not here. Not in the forest." The darkness around me seemed to shift, the trees closing in, their branches snaking toward me like skeletal hands. I could feel their fingers digging into my skin, pulling me closer, tightening around me. The whispers grew louder, and my reflection's laughter echoed through the forest. "You can never escape your past," it taunted. "You're trapped, just like all of us." I wanted to fight. I wanted to scream, but all I could do was stand there, paralyzed by the weight of it all. The guilt, the sorrow, the realization that I was trapped here in this place with no way out. I was beginning to lose my grip on reality, on myself. I couldn't tell if this was still a dream or if it had become my reality. The lines were blurring, slipping away, and I was falling deeper into the nightmare. I had been pulled into the forest, yes. But I had also pulled the forest into me. And now it was consuming me, piece by piece. The creature, the twisted reflection of me, smiled, its eyes gleaming with dark amusement. "You thought you could outrun it," it whispered. "But it's too late. The forest has you now." I could feel it, the weight of the forest, the presence of it, pressing down on me, suffocating me. The trees were closing in, their branches reaching for me, their shadows stretching like hands to pull me deeper into the darkness. I tried to scream. I tried to fight back. But the forest was inside me now, and every attempt I made to break free was met with resistance, like something was holding me in place. And then, through the chaos, I saw it. The only thing that had kept me going all. This time, a sliver of light. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. A crack in the darkness. A way out. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, my legs aching, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest was trying to stop me, the trees twisting in my path, the whispers growing louder, more frantic. But I kept running, not stopping, not looking back. And then, just as I was about to reach the light, I felt a hand, cold and skeletal, grip my shoulder, pulling me back. The forest had me, and there was no escape.